welcome to this week's edition of The Whistleblower. My name is Ian Trent, and joining me is another outstanding panel of water polo personalities. First up, the former FINA referee and long-standing coach around Tigerland, nationally, internationally, you name it, he's done it. Good evening, Phil Bauer.
Evening, Ian. Really looking forward to talking to our special guests. Absolutely. And listening to Danny talk about or give us some questions on the rules tonight.
Okay, and our guests are Roosters fans too, they're all losers. Australia's leading referee is in Melbourne in lockdown, and his name is Danny Flahive. He joins us once again. Hi, Dan.
Hello, Ian. Thank you for having me once again. Yes, at least we're let 25 k's away from our home now. That's one little thing extra.
Fantastic. Well, clap it up, mate. More to come, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Now, our rookie panelists, and we love them. First up, panelists, it's the former Australian representative player, manager, World Championship manager, the only one that exists, Australian Water Polo board member, and general women's water polo mover and shaker. She joins us now from northern New South Wales. I don't know where, but she's up there somewhere. Welcome, Leanne Barnes. Got to turn yourself on, Leanne. There you
go. Rookie mistake. Yes, I'm here in northern New South Wales at Casuarina. I'm staying at Jackie Giles, was Jackie Thomas's place. So having a fabulous opportunity to catch up with those long-term friends that you make. But of course, in New South Wales, Danny, we can travel from the south on the Victorian border to the north on the Queensland border.
Yeah, that's just rub it in, Kermy. Thanks, mate.
Mate, you'll soon be there. You'll soon be there. Now, our special guests coming up in just a little while. It's Pat Jones and her daughter, Kerry Turner. And I can tell you, if you don't know their stories, right, this will be a top episode of The Whistleblower. News in water polo. Well, it comes up every day. There's this, that, whatever around Clubland. But Phil, what I get is I get questions all the time. Will there be an Australian water polo league this year or early next year? What do you reckon?
I think there'll be some sort of league. There's a meeting on, I think the 31st of October. There should be an announcement around that time as to what is going to happen.
Okay, well, that'll answer a few questions. And then, of course, the next question we have on everybody's lips, will there be an Olympics? What's your view?
From what I hear, there's definitely going to be Olympics. It'd probably only have a local spectators, but I believe there would definitely be an Olympics.
Okay, they don't do it by Zoom though, do they?
No.
Penny, what do you reckon?
Oh, look, I've always said, Minnie, that I don't think it'll go ahead, but the closer we get to it, the more rumours are coming out that yeah, it's going to go ahead. But as Phil sort of said, spectatorless. So it should be very interesting.
Yeah, anything like what's happening in Europe and America, boy, oh boy, it's hard to see it going ahead. What do you think, Leanne?
I think it will go ahead. I just think if you look at the sports that are happening internationally, we've got, you know, the tennis is rolling out, other things are happening, and I think that Phil and Danny are right that it'll occur, but it's going to be with local crowds only. So I think it's important that it does go ahead, and we'll just need to learn to operate in a new paradigm.
Let's hope. See how we go. The tickets, they'll be hard to get probably. Anyhow, in the meantime, we have had some fantastic feedback about our referees segment. So without further ado, good evening there, Danny once again, and Phil. Questions and answers, common scenarios in refereeing. Take it away, Danny.
Okay, look, I'll just sort of read it out a bit easier. Blue team goalkeeper saves a shot from the opposition, from the white team, and now is in possession of the ball. After the shot, both teams are swimming towards the white team's goal. A few seconds later, after the shot, a player from the white team rises up from under the water and pushes the ball under whilst the goalkeeper has their hand on the ball. Okay, in this scenario, what used to happen, if the goalie takes the ball under, it's a penalty inside the 5 metre. It's a penalty. Okay, what they've done now with new instruction from the TWPC is that if the goalkeeper is not trying to drag the ball away from the opposition or swim away with the ball from the opposition, then if it's a ball under, then it's just a minor foul to the attacking team. So it's just a contra foul and a minor foul to the opposition. So where it used to be a penalty, now it's only a ball under, and it's a minor foul, which is very interesting. And a lot of people still forget that if the goalie's not, as we say, dragging the ball away from the defender, and it's just hand on top of the ball under.
Ball under only.
Yes.
Okay, good one there.
It is a new one. Yep.
Yeah, I had my first game refereeing. People, you guys can't envisage me refereeing, but GPS, Polo, and all you referees out there, I tell you what, after listening to all the hoo-ha about the changed interpretation, the re-changed interpretations, etc., it's not easy. So be patient.
Yep. Coaches, be patient.
Please.
This one's interesting. Okay. Player 3 from the white team is excluded. The player leaves the field of play on the side closest to the fly substitution area and is advancing towards the re-entry area. Okay, so the player swims out the side to the substitution, goes under the rope. The white team has possession of the ball. The substitute player of the white team enters the area for the flying substitution. So what they've done is the players come from the bench in the flying substitution event, swam down the side of the pool. Okay, he then touches hands with the excluded player, and then he enters the field of play, like as in a flying substitution. Okay, a lot of discussions here is it a legal entry, a legal player? Is he rolled for the game? So what should happen is, if you're excluded, any excluded player has to go to the re-entry box. There's no other way you can change. They have to go to the re-entry box. So what happened here is the other player that's come in, swam down the flying substitute area, they did the high five and come in. So that's only an improper entry because he didn't go through the re-entry box. So that's only an exclusion from the substitute player, and then he has to go back to the re-entry box. It's not a roll for the game. It's not an illegal player. It's just an illegal entry. So he then has to swim out and go back to the re-entry box. And it's always the substitute player that gets excluded.
So Danny, where's the free throw taken, and what's the clock reset to, the shot clock? Okay,
it's reset to 30 seconds, and it's taken from where the player's gone out the field to play. Or if it's behind play, it's virtually if the ball's behind where the foul is, then that's where they can play it from there. If it's in front, it's got to go back to where the foul leaves the field of play. In the old days, if a player left the field of play, it used to be rolled for the game for misconduct. Okay, now that doesn't happen at all, because the only way you get rolled for the game now is actually if you leave the water or hop out of the pool and walk away. Swimming out the side's fine. It's not an exclusion at all now. It's not being rolled for the game anymore. It's not misconduct.
So there's no extra foul on player number 3, who was the first excluded.
No extra foul. It's only a foul, exclusion foul on the substitute player coming in. So it's always the substitute player's fault, never the person that's being excluded. It's a very tricky one, but you have to go to the re-entry box always when you're excluded.
That's a good one. Okay, question 3.
Okay, the blue team is in attack. An ordinary foul was called on the perimeter inside 6 metres, as there is one player from the blue team without a cap. The referee calls the ball out for the cap replacement. While the ball is out, the blue team centre forward, number 7, makes an intentionally hit with his elbow and hits the defender, white, across the face. Okay, it's an intentional, it's a brutality. Okay, so that player is rolled for the game with substitution and replaced after 4 minutes. Now, normally for a brutality, there would be a penalty as well awarded. But because the ball's been taken out of the water by the referee, it's an interval time, such as a goal, timeout, quarter time. So the 4 minutes for the brutality still stands, but there is no penalty awarded because it's interval time. Phil, does that make sense? That's sort of understandable?
Yeah, that makes sense. Well,
Or the rule, that's the rule.
That's the rule. The rule
Doesn't make sense, but that's what the rule is. Because it's interval time, there's no penalty awarded.
Yeah, yeah.
Makes sense. Questions?
No worries.
Is Kerry. What about
So if any of our audience had any questions for Danny on that, they could answer in the Q&A box.
Absolutely. Go to the bottom of your screen, right? Click onto Q&A. If you've got a question, away you go. Write her up there and we'll put it on there. If you'd like to ask a question of our special guests or Danny, Phil, you name it, Leanne. Okay. I'm thinking now, but that's it. We've only got 3 questions. Therefore, we carry on. And our special guests are the ladies that you can see on your screen now. To the left, we have the former Australian team player and now New South Wales Sport and Rec absolutely heavyweight. But I say that in the nicest way. Welcome, Kerry Turner.
Thank you, Minnie.
Lovely to have you on deck. And of course, your gorgeous mother is Pat Jones, sitting there on the right of your screen now. And Pat, of course, a pioneer of women's water polo in New South Wales, also Australian teams, and was part of the push for women's water polo in the Olympic Games with Leanne, of course, and we'll have lots to talk about. All right.
Thanks, Ian.
Let's turn our attention first up to Pat. And Pat, how did it all start for you? Was it your husband, Bill, that got you into water polo, or were you there before him?
Oh, no, he started me watching water polo every Sunday night at Balmain Pool. It was a big date. And it was a lot of his friends that he, like Doug Lang and Keith Whitehead and Ray Smee, they all played in the same team. So it was an outing. We enjoyed it.
I think they played with a leather ball too, Minnie, a leather ball. They were tough back then.
Yeah, they
It was
worked.
a tough game.
And
I think
those
you would have heard
guys,
that before, haven't you, Ian?
yeah, those guys, the guys that you mentioned, all really big names in Australian water polo history. Phil, you played with a leather ball, didn't you? You're a bit older.
I remember actually picking up a leather ball at training once and I couldn't throw it. But no, I never played with one. Paddy, so they all played for Bondi, is that correct? And,
That's right.
And all those people you talked about, they're all legends of Bondi.
They were.
And unfortunately, Bondi, along with Bronte and a number of other clubs, don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
But you're an Eastern Suburbs girl?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Miss King's Cross, sorry, just had to say. Beauty pageant, Miss King's Cross, actually, Phil Bauer.
Oh, we didn't know that.
Yes.
Oh,
And-
I was
and
a
what a-
Australian
and what a-
question,
And what a stunner. And Paddy, look, I go back to those early days because I played my first nationals in 76. But in the early days, it was very much South Australia and Victoria that were up there. There was Carol Angland and people there. So obviously pretty hard for you in New South Wales to beat through and get the women's program up there and running in New South Wales.
It was until we began to get a couple of the boys that were interested in coaching the girls, and it slowly moved ahead in that way. You know.
Yep, and look, and I think, you know, that the push from New South Wales, when New South Wales really picked it up in the women's program, back then in the early 70s is when things really started pushing on for us to get that formal national championships happening.
That's true. It was then.
And lots of fundraising back then, Leanne, like it was, it wasn't really prominent. And I just remember seeing Mum get all the material for all the uniforms and handing the material to the girls and saying, here's the pattern for your mum to make them, the uniforms, but a lot of pride in wearing the blazer for New South Wales. And so those early days, there was lots of lamingtons and, just the smell of an oily rag to get, even to a national titles.
It was tough. Pat, did you have to step on any officials' toes to push it through to get a New South Wales team going?
Oh, look, it was pretty, I was pretty lucky because we moved in that circle of, because of whom I mentioned, Ray and Doug, Keith and Billy, they'd all been at school together. And they also knew the ASU fellows. And we'd often be out to dinner together so we could freely talk about the things that were needed. And, that way we sort of got the questions asked at the right time.
See, there's a beautiful photo. Look at all of you with your blazers.
Yes.
There is a nice photo. What year is that?
My God, Phil Bauer, how young were
Phil's
you?
there.
I
Yeah.
was very young, wasn't I?
Baby.
Yeah, I think that was 1974.
74.
Remember correctly? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was the first time Queensland had come down.
Yes.
And that Queensland entering brought five states into a championship. And I think that's when you could really push to become a national championships.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, because 75, we then had every state entering. We had it in Perth, and West Australia for the first time played.
Yes, and Queensland were very popular team. They had a lot of support up there too, so that helped a lot.
Yeah, they were very. I remember they were very popular with New South Wales because the first 2 years they weren't very competitive. Unfortunately, after that they became super competitive when Minnie was coaching state teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, they unearthed a girl called Debbie Handley. And Debbie, she might have been watching from, she lives in Dubai now. Debbie was just unbelievable, wasn't she, Leanne? She was, you played against her. Fortunately, I never did. she was a tough there.
Look, she was, and I think, and Pat would recall the players that were there in her teams back in those middle 70s years, and then taking the teams away over that period. And there were people like Debbie Handley, there was Carol Anglin, there was Betty Gawthorne. There was a whole range of players back then that really set the scene. And Pat, you were, really out there pushing for women. There was other people that were assisting you through that process. But you also, look, you had a daughter in the team, but you also had a very young family as well. So you were having to balance being a mum with Kerry and Lisa still, running around, as toddlers, and having other players playing, in state teams and national teams. It's really hard to balance. How did you do that?
Well, I had a lot of help actually. My mother lived close by, so she helped me, and that makes a big difference when you've got somebody that can be there when you're not there. And I did go back to work in those days as well, so I was working full time.
Wow, being a driver for women's water polo, managing teams and a family. My gosh, it's a real balancing act, and it's nothing. And sadly, for many women that are playing now and getting into, it's still the same. So it's great to have people up there like you that have done all of that that are a bit of an icon for our sport. I think that's fabulous.
Oh, thanks, Leanne.
Leanne, what I
I just
remember,
enjoyed it.
what I remember of Mum and being in that busy house was, you know, she just was really passionate about making a difference. And I think, you know, Mum's era, they left school at 13 girls, you know, went to secretarial school. I think, Mum, you would have really loved to have gone to university or, you know.
Yes. That's true.
So I think there was a bit of drive there for, you know, doing something to, you know, make a difference. But what is also interesting is at the age of 40, Mum took up sport. So in amongst all that, what were you playing? You were playing
Netball, touch football,
and water polo.
And then went on to become a golf guru around the countryside.
Later.
Paddy, can I take you back to 76? And it's the first national team, women's national team was ever picked. And you as manager and Paul Gare as coach take the Australian team, and Leanne was in the team, I'm sure, take the first team to Honolulu. Do you have any recollections of that?
Yes, I do. I do. Very happy recollections of that. We stayed in the Moana Hotel, which was a very good place to stay. Paul Gare was a good coach, and we had a good selection of Queenslanders in that team too. And we did well. And
It was the first time, wasn't it?
it was, yes.
Up on the screen there, some big names. There you are on the left, Pat, top left, Carol England.
Carol.
Middle of the top row, Debbie Handley.
Yep.
Geez, you're lucky to have her. Me too. Rhonda Laws down front row. Carol down the front there. There's Sister Tracy on the right, bottom right.
Tracy's there.
Sue Rayburn.
Sue Rayburn.
Clark's third from the left, front row.
Faye Grant.
Yes, Faye.
Gail Lord.
Gail Lord.
Yes.
And Minnie, that was the first time they could wear the crest on the jacket as well. So the ASU allowed that. And I know, Phil, you were saying it was a bit of a battle to get the crest for a junior team to go away. But if you're looking closely there, it was the Australian crest on the blazer, which was granted.
Coat of arms.
Coat of arms, yeah.
Okay, great bit of history there.
And Danny Flahive's sister-in-law, Lynn, is there too in the front row as well.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to watch most of your games because I was over there for Balmain team. We stayed in the same accommodation, and I can remember you. I can remember you, Pat, on the last night dancing with the travel agent who'd organised both the teams' travel and accommodation. Can you remember that? He was actually an old school friend of mine on his way to LA, and he stopped to watch the girls play.
He had a business in Odo Junction, didn't he?
Yeah, Edgecliff.
Travel business.
Yeah, travel scene at the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, they were the good old days, Phil.
They were. I can remember you put a curfew on the girls last night. Kermit, can you remember being told to be home by 12 o'clock?
Phil, I wasn't in that team.
Oh,
I didn't get in.
Team?
No, my first team was 78. That team was pretty sensational team though.
You should have been in that team, Kermit.
Why was my Kermit?
Oh, well, I don't know.
Should have tried harder, Kermit.
Yeah, I should have tried hard. It was my first nationals. You know, Victoria won, but I think it was the last time Victoria won a nationals. But you know, I think in terms of there was people like Pat, there was people like Paul Gare, the real pioneers of our sport. I mean, Phil, you obviously there with another squad. There was the Thompsons, you know, Elsa and George, who were just people that, like Pat, had a real passion for making sure the right thing happened for women's water polo. And, you know, they are really the parents of our sport for women in Australia. Those people that were so important in the 60s and 70s. It's just, you know, and it's fabulous that you're still doing it, Pat. You're still doing it.
Still doing it.
You haven't mentioned the word 80s.
I've got a question from Alicia Smith, former panelist, and also former national team goalie. And I quote, there is no encouragement or offering for females in water polo, especially those with families, to be involved these days. I know Pat led the fight for women's water polo, but did she have to fight within Australian water polo for her position to be involved and to have a say? Remember back then?
I don't remember having a fight within water polo. I think we were always encouraged by
Great.
I always felt encouraged. It helped having Billy involved at that level too. So
That would have been the first instance in water polo where there wasn't a fight.
I had a sense that there was a fair bit of respect for both Leanne and Mum from Australian water polo, that you were doing what you were doing and pushing hard. I think some of your biggest battles may have been internationally than the support you had in our homeland. So the bigger fights were with FINA and, you know, trying to get that recognition globally. That's just what I observed. I've always thought that Mum was held in a high regard, and so were you, Leanne. So I think that was really well grounded in our country. But I don't know whether that question is about supporting women that want to maybe coaches or whatever, which is another sort of discussion about whether it's easy to be a player, have a family, then want to coach. Some of that probably is some good turf to discuss, because I think it's hard for a lot of sports. I've worked with all of them around trying to get more female coaches and trying to get particularly past players, because they make amazing coaches, but then they have their families and is there support for that. And I know, Phil, you always have, you know, women as mentor coaches, and that's a really good thing for them to get that experience coming through. But I know that's a bit of a battle for all sports. Women, we don't make money when we perform. And in a lot of sports, you know, we're still just starting in professional payments. So you start off pretty broke when you go to your next phase of wanting to be involved. But definitely athletes make really good coaches, and that transition is a bit tougher for women. So I'm not sure, Minnie, if that was a bit of a double-barreled question.
It's from a woman.
I think you're right there, Kerry, that it's about, nowadays it's about women having families and being able to still be in the sport, and it's very, very difficult. I've got a daughter in exactly the same position, and I mean, she's battling with what she's got to do. But it's something that, yeah, as you said, it needs to be brought up and it needs to be discussed. But I can't imagine anyone saying no to either Pat or Leanne when they got their backs up and wanted something. I'm quite sure the easy way was just to agree with them and not fight with them. I know I've probably had a few things of your mother where I just agreed. I knew I could never win, so I just agreed. Paddy, I don't know how much National League you watch these days, but Open Nationals, when you were really involved, were based on state teams, and the trophy that was played for was the Elsa Thompson Pat Jones Trophy.
yeah.
Do you think the AWL, the National League, is the best way? I mean, it's a great competition, but should we have a nationals above that? Not going back in time, but having state teams competing against other state teams.
I think that was always a very healthy thing, having state teams against state teams. The extra pride, I think, was there in their state, as well as each other in a team. It was a good thing. I'd like.
Oh, look, Paddy, I absolutely agree, and I think I look back to the 1970s when you were so very heavily involved, and I started playing with the national in nationals for a state team, and then we moved in, Phil, to the, you know, having later on the club-based competition and getting rid of the nationals, and I just think that staged approach really gave a developmental pathway for players. and there was that stepping up. And sometimes I get a sense now that we probably need to rethink a bit of the structure of how things happen to give us the best levels of competition. You know, you can always look backwards and say what worked, what didn't work, and how do we move forward. And I think that, you know, the things that Pat and Elsa and others put in place for those first rounds of national championships leading up into the 1980s gave us very strong national teams that came out of those national championships, because we had strong club competitions in the States, led to strong state teams, and then we picked the cream of the crop. It was a different framework to what we're operating in now, but maybe sometimes it's good to look back and say what worked then out of that era and what could work now.
You know what I really loved, Kermit, was like your excitement about going to nationals, and that you played in your club. There was a bit more relaxed about your club. Your club was still first grade, it was still rough and tumble and all that sort of stuff, but it was social. And then you made the state team, that's your elite pathway. And so there was this bit of a division then between what club was. And I think my boys coming through the sport and where the club is everything, and there's a lot more required of volunteers, because you have to do, you know, club, state, nationals. And I think that's quite a big burden, having gone through it myself. So I think that I know it was around building up a club presence right through to the top, but maybe that in today's world is too tough. And maybe it wasn't bad to have that separation of the elite pathway experience and that more social fun club with seriousness attached. But it just felt like when I went to club training, I could relax a bit more. State training was different because I chose to be on that path, you know?
Yeah, can I put a bit of a spanner in the works? In
Yes.
those days, we had a South Australia that was pretty competitive and pretty strong.
And Tasmania.
And Tasmania, of course. And Victoria, hello. They're not as strong anymore. And we don't like those blowout scores. And that's one of the things that led to the demise of the Nationals. You know, people just don't want to get done, you know, 30 blot or whatever. It's just not good for the sport. It's not good for the spirit. It's not good for anything, right? So what we really need to do is improve the sport in all of those areas and then do it again. Then we can do it again. I mean, it won't take 5 minutes, but what do you think, Phil?
Yeah, there's various points of view. Water Polo Australia are bringing back nationals for juniors, and my personal opinion, it's great, except they've got too many teams entering. I can see a spot where a state of origin for state teams, and you know, I like the tribalism of it. When I was playing, I always wanted to make a state team. That was the big thing, you know. It was just below making an Australian team. I think we need those steps there.
We definitely do, Phil, but as long as we make a state A team, not the B's, C's, D's, E's and F's like we're getting now, which I find is totally ridiculous.
Yeah, you're correct there.
Okay, now I've got a question here from a young Nick Watkins.
Yeah.
Beautiful main bar. Regards to your parents, Nikki. Question for Pat, Kerry. What is the next biggest challenge women's water polo faces in Australia, even with our women being one of the top teams in the world? What do you think?
Biggest challenge.
Do you want me to go first,
Yes,
Gabby?
you go first.
I think there's a challenge for the sport in general and all sports, and that is remaining as relevant and as nimble in a world that's changing really quickly. So I would love to see for women and for the whole sport of water polo to be magically engaging of young people and to really embrace that participation space in a really, you know, interesting and fun way. Like even if we get young people to design what that looks like would be a really, because the sports that are actually surviving at the moment are doing things like that. If we only focus all our attention on the top of the triangle, that could lead us into some disarray down the path, because we don't know what our structures are internationally anymore. We don't know the future of, I hate to say it, the Olympics and all those sorts of events. It can't just be about the top of the triangle. So what I would love for all girls out there, because I mean, this is my job 24/7, is to feel confident to pick up water polo and to have a go, and for them to feel okay, no matter where they're playing it, and to have that real great experience, because it's such a great game to play. Like, it's fun, you know, and I think anyone that plays the game will actually really experience that wonderful, you know, thing. And that's what I loved about it. And it was social, it was all those elements. So I'd hate for the future of women's water polo to not still attract that really big base that that enjoys the game. And we just, you need to be on it. You need to not be just a sport that's just about one side of the whole offering. So so yes, you do want to have success, but you can't get that without a great base. But for survival both, you know, financially and in terms of its positioning, we've really got to think of really fun and interesting ways to engage, you know, young girls in particular. So Water Polo New South Wales are doing some really fun stuff in this way, changing the colours up, trying to go to girls that haven't played before. I'm really proud of what they're trying to do there. So I know that's probably not the answer you thought I would give, because, you know, it's easy to say to get to that top, we need to do X, Y, and Z, but you just can't stop looking at being appealing to people out there in the community, because yeah, there's a lot of distraction, and a lot of young people have a lot more options these days. And there's also a real need for a place for people to come together and for young people to be connected to other people. You know, look at what's happening in our world right now. And I just think, yeah, we just got to have some more fun experiences, not win at all costs all the time.
Of course, you're talking about
an
boys
interesting
as well.
word.
Talking about boys as well, aren't you, Kerry?
What's that? Sorry.
Talking about boys as well.
Totally, the whole gamut. You know, one of the best things you can do in any sport is to set up youth forums and youth run programs, get young people to design the offering, and it'll just work in our favour. Yeah.
And look, and I think living in a regional centre, you know, where obviously sport is very, very important. Being in the school system, linking in with swimming clubs, linking in with other programs, I think is going to be absolutely critical into the future for a whole range of things for young people getting involved in sport. And I absolutely applaud the wonderful work that Kerry's doing with the work she does with the New South Wales the Department of Sport, because the program's absolutely critical, particularly for women. But, you know, you've got a range of choices in cities, but in the regional areas, there's challenges for young people in sports and schools and clubs that are already existing, and swimming clubs are challenged. Give them an alternative to get their kids together to play games and to do water polo and stuff like that. And I think we just need to think outside the square a little bit. And as Kerry has said, I think is absolutely critical to hear what young people are saying about, you know, if everything's being designed by people our age, it's not going to resonate with them. It's got to be led by those young people saying how they think that they could be best involved. And I think it's just not about the centres, it's also about regional Australia as well.
Yeah.
Okay, ladies, you're talking about school sport and school water polo in this context. Have we ignored school water polo, particularly in the combined high schools area, for too long now? It's going okay in the private schools, but CHS water polo, my experiences, I refereed a bit, and boy, oh boy, it's not what it was.
I have been away from the CHS scene for a while. So I guess, is it because there's just not enough competitions, or there's not a really good structure to it, Minnie? Like, what's the...
Oh, well, it just seems people have lost interest. The standards awful. Kerry, I don't know. I've just been playing a whistle. You know, I haven't been involved in the nuts and bolts of it, but I don't think anybody helps them.
I think, Ian, it's leadership.
Yeah.
And I mean, schools have knocked back help from Water Polo Australia for 50 years. You know, they did their own thing, but now they don't have those people at the top, at least I believe in New South Wales, that are pushing in the CHS system. People like John Fox, who's been on our show, is working in ACT, is definitely pushing at school sport. But there's not enough people around Australia. And I don't believe it'd take too much to get it up and running again.
There's a real issue.
Clubs want to be involved with schools.
Yeah, just with COVID-19 and impacting and really decimating a lot of the bigger sports. So, you know, your AFLs, your rugby leagues, your rugby unions, that all those big sports that had 40 or 50 development officers that were working in the school system are down to 5 or 4 staff now. So there's going to be a lot of reimagining what's happening in terms of sport working with schools, and that puts a lot more pressure on the school teachers to provide the sport experience as well. So I think we're in really new times where, you know, how we often say we don't have the resources. The big end of town doesn't have the resources right now. So it's going to be an interesting few years ahead of us in terms of how that relationship goes between sport and school sport. So just watch this space. It's not like the big end of town's got the resources anymore.
Yeah, 100%.
Money.
Paddy, let's get back to you.
Yes.
And just a few light questions if we can, because I know we're going to get on to the Olympics. But Mad Roosters fan?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But then I walked into you at the football stadium one year, probably about 8 or 9 years ago, where there was a Roosters game and a Swans game on, one at the cricket ground, one at the sports stadium at the same time. And you'd given up on the Roosters and left for the Swans. Can you remember that?
That was because
I think we were coming last at the time. But
friends.
was that Billy pushing you to the Swans?
Phil, Dad's just sitting there. We can't say that too loudly.
No, actually, that was never one of my thoughts, Phil. But the friends that we had, well, you remember David?
Dave Bullock?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. He pushed you on.
Good friends of ours, and they really loved the Swans. So I just, hang around with them.
Yeah, right. But you are a true Rooster.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
First.
So let's get on to the fight to get. So you helped establish Australia into a national championships. They started Worlds. Were very successful in Mini 86.
86,
86.
84.
84.
Yeah, and 86 was the first World Championships and the only World Championships we've won, with Minnie as coach, Leanne, manager.
Correct. That was 86 in Madrid, and 84 the World Cup in Los Angeles.
Yeah. So is that when everyone really started thinking about Olympics in 2000, or did it happen before that?
Not really, actually, because the 80s, I had quite a lot of things to do in the work I had, and I had to back chalk a bit there. So I didn't stay. I realised what Leanne and Ed were doing, but I couldn't be part of it. And that was the 80s. I left it to you two guys, and you did very, very nicely. Thank you.
Oh no, we bashed our heads against brick walls time and time again. Paddy and Phil, we sort of started, Paul Gare kicked off on the international scene for the push for getting women's into the Olympic Games. 1981, there was the first meeting that was held in Brisbane when we had the World Cup there.
Yeah.
And then in 1982, he sort of handed over that representation on that international committee, and there were people like Taya DeWitt and Sandy Neiter and others involved then. We sort of kept on thinking in 84, 86, 88 that things would change as we moved around. And then Pat burst back onto the scene in 91, came back in as the manager of the team in 91. We went away to Los Angeles. Do you remember that fabulous trip when you were the manager in 91 and Dave Woods was the coach? I think, Paddy, you had to save the girls from people shooting guns in highways and stuff.
Yeah.
And Paddy got back involved in 91, and it was really good because I could do things in a particular way and Paddy could do things in another way. So we complemented each other. And it was really that push with getting Paddy back in doing some things that were a bit off the wall sometimes, that took us out of the usual flow of things. So that's probably the pathway of it.
It was like you two were in a relay and you kept handing the baton to each other.
We spent a bloody lot of time on the telephone, let me tell you,
Yeah, we did.
debriefing and pulling our hair out.
Yes, we worked well.
Can we relive the big moments in, was it 98, when you had people with placards and you went to the airport and Lizzie Weeks burst into a meeting? You want to relive that with us, Paddy?
96.
96. Right.
Yes, 96, yeah. Well, that was all to get on with the newsworthiness we had at the time. We had a lot of press, and it was educating people in our own country as well as other places, and I think it was working very well for us. Did that?
Yeah, you had a reporter that kept feeding you things. Someone from SBS. Are they still in the system?
Yes.
Yeah. And we still don't know who it was. Who is it?
Oh yes,
Liz Deep Jones.
Liz
Liz
Deep
Deep
Jones.
Jones.
Yes.
Yeah. She and Paddy formed just a wonderful relationship, which was just great.
Yeah, they were great. She was great. And she actually gave me the tip on when
The stuffer.
the stuffer was coming through the airport and how we could stage our little demonstration at the airport.
He never actually came through the gates. He was ushered out the back. So we're there with our placards and the television and Mum getting interviewed, and he didn't come out. And there was this lone baggage that was going around the carousel. And everyone reckons he was in that bag. But it was pretty funny. They were sort of trying to get him away, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. Oh, it really wasn't true.
No.
We just imagined that.
Yeah, but you had plenty of TV there, and you had plenty of paper coverage the next day, and that's what it was all about, wasn't it?
Yes, getting a bit of press was very good.
Yeah, we just had something pop up on the QA in 91 in the States. Karen Kerr says that the Australian anthem was played and they played Waltzing Matilda. Can you guys remember that?
Yes, absolutely. And the team actually won the silver medal in that 91 World Cup. It was a fun time, and Paddy had stepped back into the role, and with Dave Woods, they just had a fabulous team and a great approach.
Yeah.
We just missed it by the last minute of that game. Because I think we were up the whole game, and the Dutch, 2 goals really quickly.
Yeah.
Bloody Dutch.
Good play.
Yeah.
Bloody Dutch.
As they did.
There's one other question that Karen actually sent me earlier this week. Can you explain? She's never really known the answer to this, but when you're manager of a state team, I believe the championships were in Melbourne, and you woke up the team and made them go for a walk at 6 o'clock in the morning, where I believe Karen then walked into a lamppost and almost knocked herself out. Can you explain the reasoning about that, Paddy?
Well, the nearly knocking yourself out just goes to show how much she needed to get up.
Yes,
early.
Karen.
Because she didn't wake up well. So she needed to have a walk and walk with me and not knock into something. But no, I believe in that. I believe in getting up early and getting yourself ready for the game. We were absolutely traditionally bad starters.
And
So,
particularly
first
Karen,
quarter-
because I don't know how you went, Paddy, but getting Karen Wade, if you're watching, and I know you will be, into the water was one of the hardest things. She would spend 3/4 of training session on the side of the pool. So I know exactly what you were doing.
Yes.
The comment from Karen is, once a goalkeeper, always a goalkeeper. How about that, Karen? What do you think?
Paddy, a couple of serious questions.
Yes.
And they come from, actually, I won't mention the name, but it's from a board member, Australian Water Polo board member. And Kerry, if you could jump in here as well. What's your view of the women's game now? And how do you think it's changed? And what type of athlete might that favour?
I'm a little bit sad that the little pests like me, and I think Leanne, you're a bit littler too. Where's the pest anymore? I mean, where's that player that can zip around? And it's sort of, for me, watching it evolve, there's a lot more physicality and a lot more, play on the ball that wasn't, the fouls were a bit quicker when we played, Leanne. And so therefore you could be a smaller player and there was a place for everyone. I think that's a little bit of, which just means you just got to pick really big Amazon women from Mars type players, and it's just, that's a shame, but that's only because I'm seeing it from that perspective. And I know this is the whistleblower, and it's, I guess any change to any law or any rule will actually dictate the types of players you're going to have play. It happens in every sport. So over time, as those rule changes change, you see a different physicality in the game. And I really love the battles we used to have with the Dutch, because they were fast and they were furious and they were light and they were, really nimble. And I don't know that I see that when I look at women's water polo now. It's a very, you have to be very, very big and strong, which is the game, I know, but it's because there's a lot more grappling and, the fouls aren't as quick. And I don't know if I've said that in a referee speak or not, but I just
Do you think it's also become a little bit too structured? Where, so I coached you, so I remember you played what was in front of you, which more times than not was not what I wanted, but it usually happened and worked really well.
Frustrate the hell out of you, Phil.
Yeah, but you'd always score a goal at the end of it, so I was quite happy. But do you think that type of player we don't have anymore, or not as many?
I might throw to you, Leanne. I sort of.
Oh, look, I think, Kez, that you've covered it pretty well. It would be my view too, that there's no way, even if I was, 20 now, the way that I played, that I would get into a national league team or a national team now, because we were different types of players. It's not one's better or worse, it's just different. And I think all sports grow and change. We see it in AFL, we see it in NRL, we see it in a lot of sports, in soccer. You're seeing it now, I'm seeing it in netball. It just changes, and the types of players change. And I don't think one's better or worse than the other. I think that there was sometimes a little bit more, I don't know how you call it, pizzazz or something, in those days when it was a little less structured, perhaps. Yeah,
and that's why I used to love watching the Dutch or playing against them, because it was always, there was always something different happening across the field, and it was very spontaneous and quite improvised playing, I think.
I've got to disagree with you, ladies. I think that both of you would make a National League team now easily. Right? I think the game has changed with the rules, as Kerry said, and there's a little bit more, or they were trying to get a little bit more driving happening, which suit both of you. I actually think the old style player had, and here's one that I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anybody, I think the old style player had better skills, individual skills, than now. Of course, our members of our Olympic team, they've got great skills. I'm not talking about the top 13, but I'm talking about generally. And I think that they had better skills in your day, for sure. And I think you'd walk into a National League team and make starting lineups. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Definitely at 16 to 18-year-old, I don't think they have the skills that they did in the 70s, 80s, and nowhere near it. Can I just keep going on with these questions? There's 3 more, and if you're not sure, I'm fine, just let it go. But what's your view of Australia's standing internationally and the expectations versus reality?
Which one? Do you want to go, Leanne?
I'll start and you guys kick in. I think that we still punch above our weight for everything that goes behind our national team and where we're standing. But I see that slipping away. I see that where we were in the 80s, 90s up to 2000 has and into those early 2000s has drifted a little way. So at that top level, we're there, but we're not there in the juniors. And I think that we need to do more. We need to look at what's working in some of these other countries, some of the, the American structure, those, what they're doing with their national teams in particular to see the very high level. And I think it's going to be a struggle moving forward.
And
yeah, the next question, and probably you're best to answer this, Kerry, because you work with so many sports. What do you think is the most important for, it says our team culture, but for any team culture?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest word in it is respect. I do a lot of work with young athletes in all different sports, and I go, pick the team, just think of a team that you think is a really good team, and they might say, the women's cricket team or the Wallaby or whatever, and I get them to go, what does it look like, sound like, and feel like? What are you seeing about that team? And at all levels, I think it's culture is around how we deal and speak to each other and how we behave, and that in itself is can be tied up in a beautiful bow called respect. It's about teamwork. It's about, and I think we just laughed about the Roosters, but I think they had an amazing team culture this year across the board. Everybody that got injured, someone could step up again. They had something about that club this year, even though they're not in the finals, but it seemed that culture was coming through. I know with the women's cricket team, the Matildas, the rugby sevens team, if I was to admire that from afar, there is this respect for each other, respect for the coach, respect for themselves and the way they behave. And they come to the game with an attitude of, I'm going to be part of this team. I'm going to give this team the best I can, but I'm also going to respect my place in this team and no one's better than it. It's about the team approach. So culture, you have to work on 24/7. No sport can rest its laurels on a culture from bygone eras. So we just talked about, the past. I think the Australian women's team of old would be one that might come sixth one year and come back and come first or second the next. And really that culture of, getting behind the team goals and the team sort of structure, but definitely about how you hold yourself, how you behave, how you talk to your coach, how you talk to referees, your pride in your, your jersey or your pride in your cap. You have to really work on this. And as a sport, I'd love to see values forums at all levels, just to have those conversations of what does it look like, sound like, feel like when we're actually a team that has got a strong culture. And the conversations you have at clubland right through to national teams.
Okay, how do we get that, Kerry? How do we educate people to go back in time?
I think it's I think one thing that I'm disappointed with sport when I work in government, because I always think it can be better than it is when behaviour gets really appalling. And there's this survey, Ian, that's done every 2 years from True North. It's a survey of Australian fans and New Zealand fans. And in the last 2 years, Australians have voted women's national teams as their top 4 national teams in this country. So this year, the top team was the women's cricket team. The second one was the Matildas. The third one was the Diamonds, the women's netballers. And the fourth was the women's rugby sevens. It was the same kind of mix 2 years ago. But what it's measured on is Australians' connection or emotional connection with through pride and respect. So Australians are saying we're respecting these behaviours in these teams. So I think if we step back and go, well, what is it about these teams that have this connection with Australians on pride, respect and value? That's a good starting point. So I think if we talk about briefly Think, Act, Play, that was a program designed all about talking about culture, behaviour, respect. And there's some really good resources in that can be used right down to club level. But it starts with conversations. It starts with really good coaching, because I think in water polo, like no other sport, the coach is actually the brand of the sport. You walk into a pool, you see the coach, you hear the coach. If the coach is chasing the referee down the pool and it getting aggro, fires the crowd up, it loses the team. So I think in all sports, there's this sort of key figure that can actually drive amazing culture. And I think in our sport, coaches are really, really critical to that. And to coach a team is a privilege, and to coach young people is a responsibility. So I would love to see more discussions in water polo about coaches' behaviour, also thanking them for coaching, because it's a big ask. But I think it's the words we use, it's how we treat people and how we respect officials. It just keeps cascading. If you walk into a pool, a water polo pool, and you see everyone losing it, then we've lost the locker room, you know, we've lost it. So I think it starts at a really basic club level, but it needs to be replicated in our national coaches as well. And it's how we deal with people. So there's some good products on the market to do that. And maybe that's a good discussion we can have next time.
Kerry, I've just received a question from Alicia McCormack, Alicia
Yes.
Smith. Does Kerry think we need to do more work on, she's talking about respect, do more work on this throughout our national programs? Is it just as important as the physical stuff, or more important?
In terms of the National League and all those?
In terms of respect for teams, players.
Yeah. Well, just quickly, that's why I actually approached Chris Harrison to design Think, Act, Play, because I was a little bit taken back at where behaviour had got to, and I saw it through the eyes of my son Jet. So he got to the national level, and I just got to the point where going to state and national titles, I just thought we can be better than this as a sport. We've got to watch how we talk and behave. And Think, Act, Play was designed as an umbrella program that gives the sport a chance to have really good conversations around, you know, respect and teamwork, but also puts in place some, you know, some values that the sport upholds. So as a spectator, what is your code of conduct as a spectator, as an official, as a coach? I've worked with so many sports in this area on sport rage prevention, and in particular, what I call it the pointy end. Like I've worked with rugby league who have been really honest about the really poor behaviour that occurs in that sport, where they have, you know, really terrible criminal activity happening in a car park. So they're way down this other end of the spectrum, and where they had to get sort of professional ground managers or paid ground managers because it was out of the realm of a volunteer. And you've got to think at that point, what are we really doing? You know, if sport is to be really inclusive and safe for everyone and an enjoyable activity, then we've gone a bit too far if that's where we're heading. So I think it really starts with our top. If you've got a product, or we've got a product called National League, and we turn up to it, then we all need to be respectful of referees in particular. And I think this is the whistleblower. So, I mean, referees, who would want to be a referee these days? It's the toughest job on the planet, and you should not be abused, and you should be respected. So where does that behaviour come from? And what are we passing down to players? And how do we have conversations with kids around respectful behaviours as well? So definitely your flagship of your sport is your elite. Whatever you see and you hear and what it looks like cascades right down to the bottom. So Alicia, my long answer to your short question was totally. A national team should uphold the best versions of themselves. Pride in the jersey. Sorry, I say jersey. Pride in the costume. And every official needs to really think about the words they use, the way they behave, and just to make sure that water polo, brand water polo, is the best version it can be. Because I tell you what, there's so much competition out there. It only takes one parent to take a sniff of that and go somewhere else.
And look, I just follow up from that, Kerry, because I think you've just hit the nail on the head. It is about the behaviours that are ingrained in what's acceptable in our sport. And I think we have some role models. I think our national team are doing some, in our women, are doing some significant work. Sharon Arnold is doing some work, no, Sharon Gist is doing some work in that area. And I see some of those players I've spoken to, you know, Rowie Webster and Zoe and Aaron Senior, it's ingrained in the things that they do. And I think one of the things that really brought it home for me was their behaviours and their sense of culture and whatever, was dealing with the disappointment of not having Tokyo this year, and how you build that and support the whole sport to look to 2021. And I've been really impressed in how they've done that. I think they need to build on that. And I think the absolutely critical thing you're saying is it's not just at that level, it's all the way down the pyramid. You've got to have the behaviours all the way down to young kids and their introduction to the sport and what their parents see and experience, what their friends see and experience. So I think we've got some good modelling there. We've just got to bring it all together.
And Kerma, I coached in the boys, like, because I had boys. So when I went to state and nationals in indoor pools, my voice was never going to carry across the pool. I knew that. So, and you know, indoor pools are really loud. So my boys were used to the fact when they came to the side of the pool, I was going to be down on one knee. They had to get out of the pool. They didn't talk. You know, we had, at the start of every season, we went through, what does it look like to respect me as a coach, respect the ref, what team do you want to be? So they did a lot of this values work. We went to, just this quick little story, we went to the Nationals in Adelaide. We were the best team. Cronulla, under 14s, was the team to beat. Yay, how often does that happen? And we got down there and we were playing really good and we buggered up this one game, the semi against West. It was one of those games where everyone got kicked out, the ball didn't go through the net. It was a disaster. And usually our rules of our team was you had game hat on, off. Game hat on was a set of, you know, things that we're all going to do. I talk, they play, we talk, then they go back to their family. So they knew it was my time with them. And at the end of the game, we always used to go to the end of the pool, right, to have our talk. This game, we had no one left, like everyone was fouled out. We lost in golden goal and we're out of the finals. It was devastating. We were the team to beat. And I was sad. I was sad for them. I'm picking up the hats and I can't find the boys. They took themselves right out to the end of the pool. By the time I walked down, these are 14-year-old boys. By the time I walked down to them, they did an arc for me to walk through because they were so sad. They said, we let you down. And I just said, then you haven't, because look at what you've just been able to do. You've turned this disappointment around. They thanked the ref. They did everything right. But I just think, isn't that a beautiful thing that win at all costs is really, you miss so much. Those young boys at 14 picked themselves up the next day. They got the bronze medal. That's all wonderful. But it was how they handled that defeat. And I just think it's so worth putting effort into doing values work with your teams, because I was a voice in their life that wasn't their mum and dad, wasn't their teacher. But I think they learnt something really important at that Nationals. And I think that's priceless. So that's what
and Kez, the best part about that for me is they take that into everything else they do in their life, not just their water polo.
Yeah, because that's what sport's about, isn't it? It's more lessons in life than anything. So that thing that I just said, a values forum. So Phil, I have a lesson plan and discussion notes. Any club can do it. It's a 1 hour chat you have with your teams and your parents. I can post that for you guys to share. It's something I used to do with schools and school kids. And the Think, Act, Play Coaches Workshop is a pretty similar thing. So the resources are there for clubs if they want to start having those discussions, you know, at club level. But what I found doing that with that boys team and having the parents in the room at the same time is everyone hears it. Everyone agrees to it. What does it look like, sound like, feel like when we're a respectful team? What does it look like, sound like, feel like when we're beating another team by a lot? How do we be respectful to those other players? And when you're young and you're starting to unpack it like that, they really do understand it. They understand respect. It's not just a word anymore. They understand what it actually feels like. And they will then create the team they want to be. So in that team, no matter if we won or lost, 2 boys had to get out and shake the ref's hands at the end of the game. It was just what we said we'd do. So that's culture.
A couple of questions, one for Kerry. You're talking about culture. Do you believe juniors need heroes? And if they do, are they the national players? And should the national players be more visible to juniors coming up? And I know when I've ever asked any Australian player, be it man or woman, to come and talk to one of my junior teams, they've always jumped up and said yes. But should they be visible to everybody?
Well, there's in the area of women's sports strategy, if she can see it, she can be it. So at the moment, women that are playing professional sport, the rising profile, they have changed conversations. They are role models. What's really important with an elite player is that when they get a chance to speak, try not to speak all about yourself and what you've done. Speak about a story that will resonate with a young person. So if we know a lot more about the fears that people have, like especially girls in terms of their body image and, you know, all this sort of stuff, or understand your audience so that you can tell a story that is going to be meaningful and resonate and inspire. I think I do quite a bit of work with athletes around storytelling and to ensure that as a role model, if they go into schools, they're going to have the best bang for that moment. If they're in front of sponsors, how do they, you know, tell the stories that will connect there? But in terms of them and their behaviour, of course, you know, it's an honour to wear the Australian hat, and it's a real honour, and your behaviour is getting watched 24/7. But as a role model, it's your connection and your storytelling to inspire. And yeah, there's a bit of strategy behind that. But they can play such a huge role in a young person's life if they get that connection right. And it's not always about what you've won. It's about the story of how you got there.
Thanks, Kes. Paddy, one more question for you, and I know Ian's going to yell at me because we've gone over time. Refereeing career, Paddy. I know you took up refereeing, and I believe there's a story about you at Gunnamatta Bay.
Yes.
You want to tell us, or will you let Kerry jump in on it?
Oh, that's nice of you to ask me that one, Phil. I know you know the answer. But we'll give everybody a laugh here tonight, okay? I was in my good whites because I was going over to netball straight afterwards to run some girls through their badges. And so I had to referee this game and then hurry over to Cogra and do this other thing. So I was all ready. I thought, oh, that's good. I can just make it. We'll get this game over and I'll make it over to West Botany Street. So we started the game and it was okay. And but the next time I had to run the ball up, there was this bit out of the side of the wharf.
So it's Gunnamatta Bay, men's second grade, huge crowd.
Yes.
Mum's in her netball whites.
And I tripped over this missing plank and into the water I fell on top of the swimmer. It wasn't very funny, really, but everybody laughed.
Yeah, it is.
It is really funny because Bobby Bryant's on the other side, packed crowd, and he blows his whistle and sends Mum out for brutality. She fell on.
So I gave him another laugh. But that wasn't very good, was it?
We did have a story, Pat, with John Whitehouse in 1977 Nationals when he actually fell in during a final while he was refereeing as well. And that was a little bit embarrassing as well. But hey, as long as we can smile about it, he did.
Is that you? No.
Sorry?
It was a dude that fell in.
No, John Whitehouse.
Oh, John.
I blame the netball side. You know how netball umpires do the side shuffle?
That
Yeah.
is true.
I think that's what happened.
I never did that on
He
the
fell because of that.
Gunnerbay, I'm not sure the shuffle would work.
And it was low tide, Minnie, so she fell like, ah!
It was a long way up the steps to get out of the pool.
And a lot of wolf whistles because she had white on. It was terrible. Had to get
I'm sure they're in good humour.
it.
Good humoured. Now, ladies,
It's good for people to laugh
just a couple of
occasionally.
messages that we've got from people, responses to what we've been talking about. John Fox says about schools water polo. Schools are essential to the pathway. There he is. There's John Whitehouse getting out of the water.
He fell
Oh,
too.
done. What a producer we've got there, Scottish Schweikel.
Did he fall
Man
in
up.
or was he pushed?
No, he wasn't pushed,
No.
although sometimes we felt like it. Not so, John. He might be listening. Schools are essential to the pathway at both the local level, and it provides a representative opportunity to both prospective national players and officials. Yes. And John Watkins says something is happening with the community and public schools, etc., and things are happening. So thank you, Watto, for that. Phil, anything else we might have?
No, not really, Ian. I think we've covered just about everything. It's been fantastic.
I think it's been really enlightening. Hey, Patty, aren't you proud of your little girl? She speaks beautifully.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm proud of me, Mum.
I'm very proud of her. She's a great help to all sports, actually.
Yeah, well, we can see why too. But
Yeah.
ladies, it's been fascinating insight on history and what you're thinking about with water polo in the past and present. And thank you very much for being with us this evening on The Whistleblower.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Ed.
Absolute pleasure. We did have a refereeing question, Danny, and it's gone. I don't know what happened to it. What did you see what that question was, Phil?
No, I missed it. Sorry.
Don't worry. I was going to ask Dan if he re-emerged, and he has, but it's gone. The question's gone.
Oh, no, I do.
I seen a Minnie.
Gentleman wanted to talk about the ball under with the goalkeeper again.
Yeah. So what the question is was, you know, why wasn't a penalty? Or the thing was that the goalie wasn't deliberately trying to steal the ball away from the defender. Okay, what happens is the defender here is snuck underwater. The goalie wasn't aware, so he wasn't trying to drag a ball away. That's why it's a ball under. And virtue of the new rule nowadays as well, once a goalie is in possession of the ball, he's swimming with the possession of the ball, you can't foul him anyway. So if he's not trying to drag the ball away from the defender and he gets caught, then it's just a minor foul, ball under.
Fantastic. Thank you, Danny. Ladies, the Jones girls, thank you very much for your attendance once again. Leanne, been an absolute pleasure. We appreciate your time whilst you're on holidays. Bill, thank you very much. Our next Whistleblower is happening on Monday, the date I have forgotten, but in 2 weeks' time. And our special guest, this is going to be really good, Erkan Shigayev, the former Australian and Russian men's national team coach. And if we thought we were going to have a few controversial episodes in the past, I'm confident we'll have one in the future with Erkan. Thank you very much for joining us. Monday, the 2nd of November is the next Whistleblower, and we will see you then.